Thank you. I'll just give a very brief description of my dental nursing because it becomes relevant. I've done some military work, NHS, private, hospitals, surgeries, prison to Harley Street, as I often say. In the workplace, I was often the radiation and mercury monitor, and we did quite a lot of research with Guy's Hospital in the 1970s and 80s. I became a freelance nurse, and I was also called back in to run an oral surgery general anaesthetic referral unit. I then decided, after several years of working, that I'd have some children. Jenny was my middle child, and she was flying through school. She was highly intelligent, asking at the age of 6 years old, how does the moon stay up in the sky? And she wanted to know everything about the universe. When she got to senior school, my son had gone to the same school and everything was hardwired. When they decided to become an academy, they asked the parents, is that okay? When they put Wi-Fi in, they didn't bother to ask the parents, is that okay? Which I find appalling. The first sort of year and a half at senior school, she was fine, although she was a bit bored. But she went to the local school because all her friends were going there, and she suffered with travel sickness. So she decided to go to the local school. When we put Wi-Fi in our home for a short time, it was because all the homework was being set online, and it became more and more difficult for her to send the homework in through the school's facilities. So we decided that we would get this newfangled Wi-Fi. And I sort of had it buzzing around in my head, is this safe? But everybody assured me it was, because I had seen the 2007 BBC Panorama programme, Wi-Fi, a warning signal, but then there was absolutely nothing on the BBC until about 2012, I believe, when they did a very good documentary on electrosensitivity. First symptoms after the Wi-Fi was fitted, strangely, the school and us decided to put it in unknowingly together. So Jenny had a real whammy. Within, that went in the October half term of 2012. And by January, we had realised that she was slightly different in that she'd become, it was a slight autistic trait, because I've treated autistic children in the dental surgery, and one in particular I remember. He had an obsession about time, and we had to keep reassuring him. And she became obsessed about washing her hair at the same time every Sunday, which I thought was very strange, because she'd never been somebody who was bothered about time before. And then in the new year, the symptoms would be random. She'd come home one day with a headache, another day it would be, there was a weird sensation in my head, Mum, I don't know what's going on. Another day she would have joint pains, and you just kind of put them down to growing because she was a teenager. Eventually, when she was doing her homework on a Wi-Fi laptop, she had a nosebleed and she came downstairs and she couldn't stop it. We don't have a history of nosebleeds in the family. She hadn't had any trauma, and as a nurse, I had a job to stem the flow. I had to pack it with cold cotton wool and pinch it really hard to stop it. So we decided, she said, well, where did this come from? I haven't picked my nose, I haven't banged it, so what the heck is going on? So she decided to Google it. So we Googled nosebleed and Wi-Fi, and we were quite shocked at the websites that we found. So shortly after that, I made a very firm threat to my other half that either he got Ethernet cables very rapidly or I'd take a hammer to the Wi-Fi router on the front drive So the Ethernet cables came at home very quickly. Unfortunately, I should have done the same at school. And I have to say that there are mothers who've gone into private schools with a hammer and actually knocked the Wi-Fi off the ceiling above their children's beds because their children are being irradiated and they are suffering physical health consequences. Our children are not snowflakes. They are irradiated by all kinds of things, Alexa, Wi-Fi, other people's mobile phones. And it's not fair on them. It really isn't fair. We are the adults. We are supposed to protect our children. We are not protecting them. They are being irradiated and culled on a daily basis. 200 children, school-age children, are lost in this country every year to suicide. And in America, it's 2,000. It has to stop. We see that there's a mental health crisis. What we actually have is an irradiation crisis. Children should not be irradiated. There is something very, very wrong in this world when we don't protect our children. And Jenny was not the only one. If I had been listened to by the head teacher, by the council, by the government, by the chief scientific officer, by the health secretary, I wrote to all of them. At the time, I thought I was trying to protect her from cancer, but I had no idea that there were these horrific neuropsychiatric effects, especially on the electrosensitive community. Some of the adults, the very senior adults with electrosensitivity, describe that they have suicidal thoughts when they walk past a mast or very strong Wi-Fi. But they have the hindsight and the wisdom to know that when they've walked past that device, the thoughts will gradually peter out. Unfortunately, our children are acting on those. And because they are feeling physically unwell, they start searching on the internet for different symptoms. They might feel a bit of anxiety. Then they might think, oh, well, I'm a bit depressed. And then that brings them to the suicide chat rooms. Or they look up, what's the best way to suicide? You know, when I grew up, we had things in place to protect us. We had a watershed. We had children's libraries, children's encyclopedia. Who the hell thought it was a good idea to let children on the World Wide Web? I don't understand why Jenny could have a toy computer that had all these games and sums on, but we can't design a preloaded tablet for school that doesn't connect to the internet, that doesn't irradiate the children. It just needs to be charged with electricity. It's unforgivable. And when you find your child hung in a tree, it's really, really shocking. I expected to be campaigning for 6 months to a year. And I have to say, David Cameron was very, very good. He apologised. And before Jenny died, he'd actually set in motion. There was a public health service ombudsman inquiry set up by a retired teacher. And she has given years of her life to this. But we were sold down the river because what happens is I knew exactly where to go when Jenny was unwell. The National Radiological Protection Board. I asked for what science they'd done before the Wi-Fi was rolled out. I was shocked at what I was sent. It was probably sent to me by the Health Protection Agency. And the word protection has been dropped. We're not being protected from radiation of a non-ionising kind because now we have Public Health England. Where's the protection? And then we have the Health Security Agency. Where's the word protection? Our children are not being protected. They're being culled by their own government, which is unforgivable. Barry Trower, Captain Jerry Flynn, lots and lots of doctors and scientists have been warning the government and they just ignore it, and it's got to stop. We have to stand together as a community. Otherwise, who the hell's going to look after us in our old people's homes? There won't be any children. They're dying of cancer and suicide, and their heart's stopping. This is all wrong. We have to protect our children. Until we do, we need to follow Cyprus. Cyprus has already switched Wi-Fi off in its schools and hospitals. They've had a huge education campaign. They've had posters on buses. They've made videos aimed at different sections of the community. One aimed at teenagers, one at parents, one at pregnant women, one at doctors. You know, we're really falling way behind. So I will wrap up with my daughter's words. I have no hope for humanity. We're destroying this beautiful earth as we speak. I'm not good enough with words to stand out from the crowd and somehow help humanity. I'm insignificant, an insignificant number on someone's screen. And so is my whole life, a tiny blip in the whole existence of the universe. And I find it hard to be hopeful when I can barely enjoy anything anymore. I believe she was giving up because she'd seen how many different people I'd contacted. I had a massive row with the local council because she didn't go to school. And so they sent me a £60 fine. And I left an absolute angry rant on their phone. And they did actually refer my complaint to their radiation officer, but I never did get a reply from my letter and communication. So we really need to do something about it. And the suicide epidemic has now transferred to hospital. We're losing doctors and nurses because they've got masks around the hospitals and they're now rolling out Wi-Fi in the hospitals. And I found myself having to call an ambulance, and I had a kidney stone. I had to have my kidney and my life saved. And before I went in for my operation, as I was being wheeled along, I noticed the Wi-Fi. So I had to give them a lecture before I went under the anaesthetic on what to do if my heart starts racing. Get me away from the Wi-Fi, or switch it off, or smash it off the wall. So that was quite a shocker. And I went back again with my meters, and they were very, very shocked. Open-mouthed was how I left my team. Thank you.